Surrender and Neti Neti. I find it most interesting that surrender brings about an affirmative thought, while the concept of Neti Neti, not this, not that, leads to a negation. However, we can see that both affirmation and negation can guide our consciousness back to the larger self, unified consciousness. Moreover, whether through affirmation or negation, we can disrupt the duality of subject-object interaction at any time. By interrupting this chain, we return to the original point of relative consciousness, the foundational subject of our human experience. In doing so, both affirmation and negation can isolate this subject, ultimately leading to its dissolution. From this perspective, other practices, whether mantras or meditation, converge on the same endpoint. For instance, when a person focuses completely on a mantra, eventually they find that the mantra, the chanter, and the act of chanting merge into one. At this point, there is no who chanting and no mantra being recited. The mind becomes a space of tranquility and silence. Of course, thoughts will still arise. But at this moment, the practitioner can see the emergence of thoughts clearly through the lens of the larger self. They can return to the mantra, or simply observe the origin of these thoughts as they arise, allowing them to dissolve naturally. Here, whether chanting or not becomes irrelevant. Initially, chanting serves to quiet the mind. However, upon reaching this level of purification, we access the root of relative consciousness. At this point, the practice of chanting, surrender, or the exploration of Neti Neti all lead back to the same essence. I would assert that once someone comprehends these insights, they naturally realize that remaining in the larger self renders not only negation unnecessary but also the practices of surrender and inquiry superfluous. Even any practice becomes extraneous occasionally from the larger self. A smaller self may emerge, prompting the need for reminders or practices. Thus, I emphasize that surrender and inquiry are the most efficient practices. These practices simply affirm and return us to the understanding that all relative experiences extend from the larger self. We continuously return to this understanding, affirming it. Through this practice, which we might call the practice of not practicing, we remind ourselves of the most fundamental and effortless truth.